You are probably within arm's reach of a cup right now. Pick it up, or just look at it. Notice the shape. A rounded bowl, wide enough for a hand, deep enough to hold liquid without spilling, with a rim smooth enough to put against your mouth. That shape is so ordinary you have never once thought about where it came from, or who first worked out that it was the right shape. Now put your hand on the top of your own head. Feel the curve of it under your fingers, the dome above your ears, the way it slopes down toward the back. It is the same shape. Somebody noticed that a long time ago, and in a cave in the west of England. Archaeologists found what they did about it. This is the story of 3 cups, the people who made them, and the reason the answer is not what almost anyone assumes when they first hear it. Let's start with the cave, because the cave matters. It is called Gough's Cave, and it sits in a gorge in Somerset, in the southwest of England. Today it is a tourist site with lighting and a walkway. 14,700 years ago, it was a shelter at the very end of the last ice age, used by a people archaeologists call the Magdalenians, reindeer hunters, skilled toolmakers, the same broad culture that painted the great cave art of France and Spain. The site was excavated across the 20th century, and the deposits produced what you would expect. Flint blades, bones from horse and red deer and reindeer, broken open for marrow, traces of fire, and human remains, quite a lot of human remains. For a long time nobody looked at them very closely. Human bone turns up at prehistoric sites often enough, and the assumption is usually burial, or accident, or something disturbed and scattered. It was only when researchers at the Natural History Museum in London went back to the material with modern techniques that the picture came apart. They started with the skulls. 3 of them, along with fragments of others, showed a pattern that could not be explained by anything natural. Not a fall, not a rock fall, not an animal chewing a body apart. What the skulls showed was work. Here is what was done to them, in order. First, the skin. There are fine cut marks across the surface of the cranium, in the places you would expect if someone were carefully removing the scalp with a stone blade. Not hacking, cutting. The marks follow the contours. Then the face, the bones of the face, the jaw, the base of the skull, all removed, deliberately broken away, leaving the dome intact. Then the edges. This is the part that changes the whole thing. Once the dome was separated, the broken edge would have been rough and jagged, the way any broken bone is. Somebody went around that edge with a tool and chipped it, small strike after small strike, working the outline down into a regular, even rim. And then the inside was cleaned out. What you are left with at the end of that process is a container, smooth-rimmed, roughly hemispherical, watertight enough to hold liquid. A bowl. The researchers who published the analysis in 2011 were careful about their language, because you have to be. But their conclusion was direct. These are skull cups. Deliberately manufactured vessels made from human heads, and they are the oldest directly dated examples we have anywhere in the world. You can go and look at one. It is on display at the Natural History Museum in London. People walk past it every day. Now, at this point you are probably already assembling an explanation. Most people do, and it is usually some version of the same one. They must have been desperate. It was the end of an ice age. Food ran out, and starving people did a terrible thing. And this is what that looks like in the archaeological record. It is a reasonable guess. It is also almost certainly wrong, and we can show why. Because the skulls are not the only human bones at Gough's Cave, and the rest of them tell you exactly what happened to the people they came from. The other bones, arms, legs, ribs, jaws, carry a very specific set of marks. There are cut marks at the joints, in the precise locations you would use to take a body apart at the shoulder, the elbow, the hip. There are cut marks along the shafts of the long bones, consistent with removing muscle. There are percussion marks, where a bone was struck to crack it open and the marrow scraped out. Every one of these is a technique visible on the animal bones from the same cave. The horse, the reindeer. Same tools, same knowledge, same care. And then there is one more category of mark, and it is the one that removes any ambiguity. Human tooth marks. They are distinguishable from animal tooth marks. Carnivores leave punctures and scoring from cone-shaped teeth. Human chewing leaves a different signature, crushing, bending, characteristic damage at the ends of small bones. The kind of thing you can reproduce experimentally by giving somebody a cooked rib and asking them to eat it. So, the bodies were processed the way food is processed, by people, using the standard butchery methods of their culture, and then chewed by human mouths. That is the finding. It is not a suggestion or a reading. It is what the bones show. And now we can go back to the starvation explanation, because there is a way to test it. Somebody did. In 2017, A researcher named James Cole published a study in Scientific Reports that asked a question nobody had bothered to calculate before. If you were an ancient human eating another human for nutritional reasons, how good a meal is it actually? He worked through the numbers. Muscle, fat, organs, marrow, using data from human body composition studies. And the answer for an average adult male came out at roughly 125,000 calories for the whole body. That sounds like a lot. So let's put it next to the alternatives. A red deer comes in at around 163,000 calories. A horse, close to 200,000. A wild boar, roughly the same. A mammoth, and Magdalenian people did hunt mammoth, sits at approximately 3.5 million. A human being is a below-average meal. And that is before you account for the fact that a human is the single most dangerous prey animal on the landscape. Deer do not plan. Deer do not carry spears. Deer do not have relatives who will come looking for them. And you want calories, you go after the horse. Hunting people for food is more effort, more risk, and less return. This does not mean survival cannibalism never happened. It certainly did. There are historical cases we know about in detail, and they are horrifying, and they follow a pattern. Bodies are consumed quickly. That keeps pulling the explanation apart. The work is too careful. Starving people do not do fine blade work. They do not remove a scalp neatly. They do not chip an edge into a smooth circle, strike by strike. When the meat is already gone, whatever this was, somebody had time. And somebody cared how it turned out. Then, in 2017, the same team found something at Gough's cave that made the picture stranger still. It was a human forearm bone, a radius, and carved into it, running along the surface, was a zigzag pattern. The researchers examined the sequence of the marks and worked out the order of operations. The bone had been defleshed first, then engraved, then broken open for the marrow. Read that order again, because it matters. The engraving happened in the middle, not before the body was processed, as some kind of marking of the dead, not after, as a memorial. In the middle of the butchery, somebody stopped and decorated the bone, and then carried on. Zigzag designs of this kind turn up elsewhere in Magdalenian material, on tools, on objects, on cave walls. It was part of their visual language. Whatever it meant, it was a thing they did to things that mattered. So the sequence at Gough's cave, as far as we can reconstruct it, goes something like this. A person dies. Their body is taken apart with skill and care. The flesh is removed. At least one bone is decorated with a design used in their art. The marrow is taken. The skull is separated, cleaned, and shaped into a vessel. And that vessel is kept. Every stage of that is deliberate. None of it is panic. Which brings us to the question that has been sitting underneath this whole time. Why? Archaeology can tell you what was done. It is much worse at telling you what people were thinking while they did it. 14,700 years is a long time, and nobody left an explanation. But we are not completely without evidence, because this practice did not stop in the Ice Age. And in a few places, it continued late enough that people were able to ask. In the western Amazon, there is a people called the Wari until the middle of the 20th century, when they came into sustained contact with outsiders. They had a funerary practice that horrified every missionary and official who encountered it. When a member of the community died, the body was roasted fact-card, the Wari, and eaten by their in-laws, specifically not by their close blood relatives, who were expected to grieve. When anthropologists were eventually able to sit with Wari people and ask them about it, the answers were not what anyone had prepared for. They found it distressing. They did not enjoy it. They described forcing themselves through it, and they did it because the alternative was unbearable. To the Wari, putting a body in the ground was an act of abandonment. The earth was cold and wet. The body would be left alone to rot, slowly, in the dark, while everyone who had loved that person walked away and left them there. When they later learned that this was what outsiders did with their own dead, they found it appalling. Consuming the body was the opposite of abandonment. It was a way of ensuring the person did not simply decay into nothing. They were taken in, carried by the people who remained, kept inside the living community, rather than left outside it. Anthropologists have a term for this: endocannibalism, eating your own. And where it has been documented, it is very often not an act of aggression at all. It is a funeral. Now, we cannot walk that explanation backwards 14,000 years and drop it on a Gough's cave. The Wari are not Magdalenians. Different continent, different millennium, different people entirely, and it would be sloppy to pretend otherwise. But it does something important. It breaks the assumption, because when most of us hear they ate their dead, exactly one image arrives: violence, savagery, the absolute floor of human behavior. And the Wari demonstrate in documented detail, that this image is not the only possibility, that the same physical act can sit inside a completely different meaning, and that the meaning can be grief, which reframes those three cups. A vessel made from a skull could be a trophy taken from an enemy. That is one possibility, and archaeologists take it seriously because trophy taking is well documented in human history. Or it could be the opposite. It could be a way of keeping someone. Think about what a cup is for. You hold it. You drink from it. You use it day after day, and it sits in your hands, and it touches your mouth. If you wanted to build an object that kept a dead person present in the ordinary business of daily life, it would be difficult to design something more effective. We do not know which of these it was. Anyone who tells you they know for certain is going further than the evidence goes. But here is one last piece, and it is the strangest one, because it is not in a cave at all. It is in you. In the middle of the 20th century, doctors working in the highlands of Papua New Guinea encountered a disease among the 4 people that nobody could explain. It caused tremors, loss of coordination, and it was always fatal. The 4 called it kuru. It took years to work out the cause. Kuru is a prion disease, a misfolded protein that damages the brain, and it was spreading through the 4's own funerary practice, which included consuming the bodies of their dead, brain tissue included. Once the practice stopped, kuru stopped with it. But researchers studying 4 genetics found something they were not looking for. Some individuals carried a variant in the prion protein gene that gave them resistance. In a population where an epidemic is killing people who eat brains, a gene that protects you from prion disease is worth a great deal, and it had spread through the survivors exactly as you would predict. Then they widened the search, and they found protective variants in that same gene, in the same functional region, in populations all over the world. Not just the 4. Everywhere. The implication of that finding is uncomfortable, and it is why the study made news when it was published in 2003 and again in 2009. A gene only spreads through a population if it is protecting people from something. A worldwide signature of prion resistance suggests prion disease was a widespread selective pressure across our species at some point deep in our history. And the main route by which humans acquire prion disease from other humans is by consuming them. The researchers were careful, and other researchers have pushed back, and the interpretation is genuinely debated. But the argument is on the table, and it has not been dismissed. That cannibalism may not have been a rare aberration in human prehistory, that it may have been common enough, for long enough, to leave a mark on the genome of everyone alive, including yours. So come back to the cup in your hand. 14,700 years ago, in a cold gorge in the west of England, somebody sat down with a stone blade and a human head fact card and did several hours of extremely careful work. They removed the scalp. They broke away the face. They chipped an edge, small strike after small strike, until the rim was smooth and even and would not cut a mouth. Then they cleaned it out, and they had a bowl. We do not know if they hated that person or loved them. We know only that they did not hurry. And that is the part one keep coming back to, not the horror of it. The horror is easy, and it is also probably a modern reflex, rather than an accurate reading. What stays with me is the patience. Somebody thought this object was worth making properly. You have things in your house that belong to people who are dead. A watch, a ring, a photograph, a jacket nobody wears. You keep them because getting rid of them feels wrong. And if pressed, you would struggle to explain exactly why. The impulse to hold on to some physical piece of a person after they are gone is not a modern invention, and it is not a cultural quirk. It goes back further than pottery, further than farming, further than any written word. Some of our ancestors expressed that impulse by keeping a jacket in a wardrobe. Some of them expressed it by keeping the skull. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What object are you keeping that belonged to someone who died? And have you ever actually been able to explain to yourself why you cannot throw it away? Tell me in the comments. I suspect almost everyone has one, and almost nobody has a good reason. We look at those 3 cups, and we see savagery. They may have looked at our cemeteries and seen the same thing.